Hello, everyone. Welcome to all of our panelists. We have Christina, Amy, Niha, and Elizabeth, and to all of you attending and to all of you who are going to see this shortly, welcome to our Impacting Our World webinar. My name's Heather. I am the founder and CEO of Grasshopper, which is a women's mentorship app and community. Of course, on the app, you can connect, you can build a profile, connect with mentors, mentees, build out your leadership toolkit, share knowledge and learn from role models. Our mission is to increase the number of women in leadership roles. And we're hoping all of you can help us on this mission. So in addition to connecting with our women on the platform, we provide a host of resources. One of them is our webinar series like today. All of our resources are available to all genders. And we are running this particular webinar in honor of Earth Day. We wanted to highlight some of the issues that are impacting our environment and what some of our role models in this industry are doing about it. I'm going to introduce the panel and let them go deeper into their backgrounds in a second, but I just wanted to mention the Q&A function. Please feel free to submit your questions for the panelists throughout the session, and at the end, Amy, who is our moderator, will go through them and make sure that we do answer your questions. Amy, can you switch to the next slide for us? So quickly, I would love to go through our panel here. How about we just go left to right on screen? Each of you can introduce yourselves, and then we'll go deeper into your roles with all of the questions that have been submitted to you today. So maybe Christina, do you want to go first?
Certainly. So I'm Christina Seidel. I am the owner of Sonnevera International. We're an environmental consulting firm. I'm also the executive director of the Recycling Council of Alberta.
Great, thank you. Amy, I'm sorry we don't have your picture up here. I just realized we were a little crowded for space, but please do introduce yourself.
Amazing, no worries. Hi, I'm Amy. I am a rising junior now at Barnard College in New York City, and I am a B2C intern and marketing intern here at Grasshopper. I'm studying economics with minors in Spanish and psych, but I've always been very passionate about conservation and sustainability efforts, so it's very exciting to be here today moderating for you all. I will pass it to Niha.
Yeah.
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Niha Elety, and I am a creative artist and sustainability advocate. A lot of my work explores fashion and art and heritage through sustainability. And my goal is, using those as a vehicle to bring inclusivity to the sustainability space. I'm also a founder and co-creator of Tega Collective, which is a sustainable fashion enterprise that champions Indigenous communities in India, also known as Adivasi communities, and their textile traditions.
Welcome. Thanks so much for coming. Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth, and I'm a partner at ZX Ventures, which is AB InBev or Anheuser-Busch InBev's corporate venture. We have a lot of initiatives around sustainability, and I really look forward to the questions. Thank you, Heather, so much for inviting me.
Of course, I'm so excited to have the best and the brightest here. We can go to the next slide, and I think it's the agenda slide. So quickly, we've already done our introductions. We'll talk about how the three of you are making a difference in our world. And then of course, we will spend some time at the end answering our audience questions. I think that the first set of questions might be for Christina. So feel free in this question here to go a little bit further into, your background and anything that you feel is relevant, but we would love to know about sonnevera's mission, who you collaborate with, and what your day-to-day looks like. It's so exciting to hear about entrepreneurship within environmental sciences and sustainability. So excited to hear.
Oh, for sure. So I'll just start with the whole idea of the journey and how I got here, which I think is probably interesting to some people, especially that are just starting out, which I think there are a few attendees that are in that position. Because I started with a fairly untraditional role. I actually started in mechanical engineering, was my first degree. And I was one of two women who graduated from mechanical engineering in my class in the early 80s in Edmonton. So it was only two of us because mechanical engineering is traditionally a man's role, not a woman's role. So that was where I started, and I really enjoyed that, and I really enjoyed the technical aspects of that. But once I got into the workforce as a mechanical engineer, I realized that I didn't feel I was contributing enough to society, especially when you start to look at more things related to the social good and obviously the environmental good. So then I actually went back to university again after working in actually the automotive field for a few years. I went back to university and took an environmental design master's. And that then allowed me to go into that environmental area, which was what I was really interested in. I realized that once I was in the workforce, that those were the areas that always intrigued me when I actually was doing reading and seeing what other companies were doing. So I went back and did that environmental design course. And so then that led me to my current position, which is an environmental consulting firm. And I also got very involved in the non-sector area within the environment as well. So after doing that then for like 20 years, then somehow I lost my mind and decided I wanted to go back to school again. So I did. I actually went back and did my PhD. That was more a bucket list thing. It honestly hasn't changed what I do professionally pretty much at all. It just allowed me to, again, drill down into that academic area, which has always been of great interest to me. So then I went back and did my PhD again in mechanical engineering with a focus on life cycle assessment, which again is related to the environment. So that's the history, and that's how I ended up getting here. And so within that, obviously, I collaborate a lot with other companies like mine. I collaborate with others in the industry. And one of the cool things is talk about interesting day to day. Every day is completely different, which I find absolutely fascinating. And that's one thing that you're allowed to do in an area like this that is always changing.
Great, thank you so much. Amy, next slide. I think this one's for Niha. So similarly, we would love to hear about your background and journey. And then all of you are multi-hyphenates here. So let me make sure that I include everything that we've researched, but tell us a little bit more about your work, about Tega Collective, and of course in that, who you collaborate with and what your day-to-day looks like.
Yeah, of course. So I guess sort of how I got my start into sustainability. I grew up in Dallas until I was about 11 years old, and then I moved to Hyderabad in India for a majority of the second half of my life, I would say. And the way I sort of fell into sustainability is realizing how different it was in both places, because in India, sustainability was just very much ingrained in the culture and the way things were accessible, whether it be, fresh food, the way you can get access to sustainable clothing, working with people in your communities. It was just a lot more accessible than I found in the US. And I was sort of just introduced to that lifestyle when I moved back. And so that's sort of how I got my start. But art and fashion have always been very interconnected in all of that. I grew up at the age of 5 learning art, and then in India I took it, formally as a subject and learned a lot about the different art forms as well. But like Christina, I have an untraditional background. My degree is in biomedical engineering in college, but that was I enjoyed it, but it wasn't really what I found to be my passion. It was sort of just um, it was a good degree to I guess get, but I think what my passion truly lies in is sustainability. And so from there, I just sort of fell into advocacy on Instagram and just through various platforms. And today I am founding Tega Collective along with a few other people. And so what Tega Collective primarily does is it's a sustainable fashion enterprise, like I mentioned previously, and it really champions Indigenous communities in India. And these communities are, and not a lot of people really know about them around the world. And to me, when I think about sustainability and when Indigenous people around the world think about sustainability, it's not really a concept to them. It's very much their lives, and it's been, the way they've lived for thousands and thousands of years. And so that's something that we're really looking to highlight, and also, not just have this be a clothing enterprise, but also champion their knowledge and sort of showcase what they'd like to the world. And our company also does funnel back a significant percentage of the proceeds to the very communities that create it, as a better part of wealth distribution, because a lot of companies, even in the sustainability space, it's difficult to find or understand ways in how you can truly be more supportive towards the communities that are supporting you and creating, whatever products or whatever you are creating. So for us, creating a better wealth distribution across the company that distributes profits in a more equitable manner is what we're focused on. And as well as, paying for Indigenous knowledge. When they are sharing Indigenous knowledge, all community members of specific tribes that are mentioned do get paid every time knowledge is shared. So that's sort of how we started Tega Collective, and who I collaborate with are these different communities. And for my day-to-day, I have a 9-to-5 job, but this is sort of, what I'm doing as my, passion project as much as I can on the side. So after work, I'll sort of be working on this. So yeah.
That is quite a side hustle. Congrats. Elizabeth, same for you. Love to hear about your background, your journey, and then ZX, Anheuser-Busch, again, who you collaborate with. And I know each day is different, but we'd love to hear about some of those different days.
Thank you, Heather. So I'm Elizabeth, and I think this is amazing. I feel in really good company in that I also did not start out on this path to be a VC. I'm actually formally trained as a stem cell scientist. I was in the lab for over 10 years and really felt for a while like I wanted to be a stem cell faculty member, and then switch track. So I formally studied biology and stem cell research as an undergrad at MIT, and then always wanted to move to Europe and went to Cambridge for grad school, where then I ended up leaving grad school early to actually start a company in the UK. It was a biotech software company. And then I moved back to MIT and really dove into the startup ecosystem in the other Cambridge, in Cambridge 2.0, working with faculty members and postdocs to spin out about 35 companies, from the lab research, tech, and biotech. And that's when I started to see kind of the emergence of more more clean tech, more sustainability, like deep into the architecture of the technology, and started looking at it from an investing perspective. And I think, like, fundamentally, I believe that really great profitable companies can have sustainability and can be like incredibly good for the world. And as investors, what is our responsibility around that? So that's one of the things that I think about. But from working at MIT, then I started Castor Ventures, which is an MIT focused fund. So all of the investors in the fund are MIT alums. And then we invested in MIT alumni companies. I looked at about 350 companies in detail, all different industries, all different stages. It was an incredible experience to start that way as an investor. And then did some consulting work, working with startups directly. There's so much work around storytelling, which we could get into. But as a founder, how do you tell your story? How do you communicate? How do you recruit great people? How do you fundraise? And kind of what are the values around that? I loved that work. And then I worked for a different fund, which is called AI Capital, focusing on AI investments. And then I very recently moved to ZX Ventures in February, where I'm a partner on the new ventures team, which is the early stage investments. So we do pre-seed to B investments in many different sectors. There's around a lot of sustainability, but thinking about what else can we do with fermentation, the future of socializing, how do we build communities together, and then agile industries, a lot about supply chain. So you can imagine sustainability and sustainable practices are in all three.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to pick your brain on that next time around. Thank you so much. I think the next questions are for Christina. Yeah. So we would love to hear about the sustainability agenda in Canada, and perhaps if you're able to shed some light on how that compares to efforts worldwide. And then how does Sonnevera ideate and problem solve, and again, what projects, we'd love to hear projects and trends you're most excited about.
Sure. Okay, in terms of, it's an interesting question about how we stand compared to what's happening in the rest of the world, because again, in Canada, we're distinctly different than in the US, but we are both very much in the shadow of the EU. So the EU is definitely the leaders when it comes to most things environmental. So we're always looking to them for ideas, and we're oftentimes trying to follow them, especially when it comes to policy, that we'll try to mirror their policy so that we can hopefully get some of their results. So that in terms of Canadians, that's really where we look. We look to the EU to look at the things that we can do. Now, I have to say, in terms of North America, there's a lot of, I think, looking from the US to Canada, because we always think, I mean, we tend to be very humble about the things that we do, but I do think that we are always happy to share some of our successes with our southern neighbors. And certainly in the area that I work in, which is essentially waste reduction and recycling, that there are a lot of the things that we've been doing that we have copied from the EU, and now you are starting to copy ours. And I think that seems to be the trend as to how those things progress. But that may be different in different environmental areas, obviously. And with your new government now, we recognize that things are going to move a lot more quickly. And good on you, because we want to work together on these things. I think the most interesting of these questions is which are the trends that I am the most excited about, because that is really, I mean, that's what keeps us going every day, and that's what keeps us excited, is when we see these new things coming that we think can make a real difference. And in my area, the real progressiveness is coming from the field. Well, a number of the fields in terms of actually making better use of our resources, but the most prominent one now is what we call circular economy. And it's interesting because what we used to refer to as zero waste and things related to recycling now are rebranded under circular economy, which is a much broader, more holistic approach, which everybody hears circular economy and they think it's about recycling, but it's not. It's about much more than that. It's really about us being smarter about redesigning things, because most of the waste that we end up producing in our society is the result of a design failure of some kind. So we need to get smarter about redesigning so that we end up not having to make that waste in the first place. And that's really what circular economy is about, is that we're smarter about designing things. And then when we design them, we make them so that the materials that go into them, the resources that we invest in them, actually stay within the economy for a long period of time, rather than just entering the economy and then getting thrown away, which is essentially the way that we operate today. And that is what has to change. But the overarching idea behind circular economy is, by looking at this different approach to our economy, we actually are going to not only protect the environment, but ideally we are actually going to enhance and regenerate natural systems. So that's the ultimate goal in all of this, is it's not just about recycling, it's about regenerating natural systems. So because there's a whole movement across the world now to do this, that certainly is part of what we do in terms of how we're trying to deal with the projects that we deal with on a daily basis, that we then work with our partners, our clients, and also our peers to actually try to come up with these better ways of doing things, and figure out ways of actually integrating those into the system so they actually happen and they lead to the goals that we really want.
That's so exciting. And I'm so glad you brought up the concept of circular economy, Niha. I remember when we did our Instagram live, you spoke at length about this. So feel free to piggyback on this as well as we move on to you. And I actually think the next questions are for you. So again, tell us about, you told us a little bit about your education and your artistic development. Feel free to give us a little more color around that. And how you come to fashion as an opportunity to advance your, sustainability and advocacy agenda. You also have, as you said, a full-time job, which is tech. So we'd love to hear about that, and if that kind of comes into play. And then what change and progress do you hope to see from both the tech and fashion sectors in the next couple of years?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think I did give somewhat of a background on my education and artistic development. But like I mentioned before, when I moved to India while I was living there, the whole idea of sustainability was just, the way of life. It wasn't really, something that you'd have to work so hard to get into. It was just a lot easier and more accessible for people. And so in terms of fashion, a lot of consumers there are incredibly aware of the process of creating their garments. So India has a mass variety of regional textiles that use fibers like jute, cotton, linen, lots of natural fibers. And a lot of these are naturally products of regenerative agriculture and how they're grown because they are native to the country. So then these fibers, are woven by weavers on hand looms or machines, and then dyed, printed, and embroidered by artisans. And consumers then, get these stitched by local tailors. So this whole process is essentially, supporting your local economy, not really exploiting any labor because you're just working with everyone within the supply chain. But, with the rise of, colonialism and the Industrial Revolution in India, these are a lot of ties to these slow processes were sort of cut. And we've seen, a rise of fast fashion models around the world. But, I think today, there has been a lot of reclamation, and a lot of history has been continued to it's continuing to go on. We're able to create and revive the different ancient weaves and fibers and fabrics that we've been working with for many years. But that's sort of how I've thought about using fashion as a way to advance sustainability, because it's not only like some sort of self-expressive medium, but it's also really explores your relationship to culture, your relationship to sustainability, our relationships to labor as well. And it's a really powerful way to explore these different systems. And it goes deeper than just, environmentally friendly fabrics and wages, right? I think a lot of the conversations need to be focused around its effect on people of color around the world, Indigenous communities, who really holds power in these systems, as well as, really embracing fashion as a product of agriculture, reviving and centering Indigenous craft and knowledge as the means to move forward. And I do kind of want to talk about Indigenous communities a bit, since, being from India, I do work with them quite a lot. And what I see a lot of the narratives being pushed, or what I think the narrative that needs to be pushed, is a lot of these communities, they know the land, they've been here from the beginning. And a good example of that is, for example, in the US, where there are wildfires yearly in California. And this is due to the overgrowth of forests in California that aren't supposed to be there. And so a lot of Indigenous communities back in the day would do cultural burnings of these different trees, because they knew that this land was quite prone to wildfires. And they would do these practices, but these practices were banned a few hundred years ago. And now, people are discovering that, that these practices were there and they were meant to prevent wildfires from happening in the first place. So for me, whether it be fashion or whether it be tech or anything, I just think collaborating with these communities, and not erasing their work, but just giving them a platform to practice whatever they're doing, so that we can actually move to that sustainable future. Because the people who have been leaders from the beginning are the ones that need to be amplified. So that's sort of the way I like to look at it. And we don't need to go crazy looking for any new systems, because a lot of these systems have been there for a while. And in terms of technology, and what I'd like to see, or what I hope to see in both of these sectors in the next few years, are more collaborations and amplifications of these communities, as well as understanding that technology is great, but it only solves or only helps the symptoms of the problem. It can't really solve the root of whatever it is that's going on. So it is important to look at everything in an interconnected manner.
Thank you so much for that. Elizabeth, I think the next set of questions are for you. Love to hear more details about your work and how the biggest beer brewer commits to sustainability. Also, the current projects and trends that you are personally most excited about, and what change and progress you hope to see, both from AB, from the industry at large, in the next couple of years.
Thank you, Heather. These are big questions.
Yes, they are. So feel free to take your time.
We can dive in on a few, and please chime in as well.
Sure.
So I think one of the things that I've been impressed with is that it's not a single approach. And I think that that's wise as far as different team goes, and then really trying to make a difference. And ABI is an enormous company, right? So I think that's both a really big quest, but then also an opportunity for having kind of large impact change. Like one of the stats that I wrote this down is there's like 21 billion cans of beer per year in the US. If we can change one of those materials, that could have a really big impact. And I've been impressed with the different ways. So, and I'm really a startup, I want to say junkie at heart. So one of the immediate things that I've been impressed with is an accelerator program called the 100 Plus. And I'm not sure if anyone on here has heard of it, but it's an opportunity for startups to participate in an accelerator. And then the partners in the accelerator are ABI and Coca-Cola, Unilever, and Colgate Palmolive. So these are basically the largest CPG companies in the world. And it's very much focused on sustainability and supply chains. So imagine a fully recyclable material of some kind that then could be put in those hundreds of products, literally going to billions of people. And I'm interested in making and thinking about changes like that. And I think that's really cool. Or how, as the largest brewer in the world, what else could we do with fermentation? And I know, Heather, I talked to you about this a little bit, but with my biology background, I find that so interesting. So last week, there was a partnership announced with Clara Foods, which is trying to make basically an egg alternative out of protein, but out of yeast. Which I'm not sure, we can talk about our definitions of sustainability, but I think the non-animal foods I think of very much in that vein. So how can you use our expertise in fermentation to do really interesting things in biology and use yeast to make that protein, which is the alternative egg, and to do that at scale? And how could we actually transform different food industries, whether that's going more towards a vegan diet or kind of we know too from the documentaries and like the meat impact or the dairy impact or the egg impact, how can you kind of change that game and at that scale? And I find that both incredibly interesting to be a part of, but to think about the ecosystem a little bit differently.
That is really exciting, and I would love to hear more as a recovering vegan. So we'll get,
Yes.
get into that.
Yes. So I'm totally a foodie too, but the food tastings are so incredible and what they can actually do in the scale. And I'm not sure, like I followed the Beyond Meat versus the Impossible, right? And so Impossible cloned basically the heme, but from a plant source. They did a lot of research to find what makes things really meaty. And they decided that it's the heme that's in meat that they feel is really meaty. So they found a plant heme and then put that into yeast and do that at scale. And then that goes into their Impossible Foods. But Heather, I agree. Vegan barbecue is officially on the menu. It's so impressive too, kind of how quickly I feel like things are changing, both from a taste perspective to the number of alternatives. I remember probably 2 years ago, I went to a talk at MIT where they were talking about how it's so hard to hack into the flavor and the texture of a non-dairy cheese, and that's something to really get into. And I feel like the momentum in the space, both the investors that have come in and then the startups and the companies that are doing this is incredible.
Yeah, I do think it depends on where you are. Certainly if you're in Canada or the Northeast, I'm lucky that I'm in Austin, but in the rest of Texas, you know, the alternatives are harder to find, but
I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
at even at my college cafeteria, that I feel like this is the most mainstream of mainstream food. The amount of vegan meat and vegan dairy alternatives that are popping up in the lunch line are incredible. So if you're getting university cafeterias to buy into this previously like cutting edge sector of food, it's pretty awesome.
I think so too. And one of the things too is, so I'm totally nerding out, but if you look at some of the ingredients in this, there's like maltodextrin, or there's all sorts of fillers that are used that aren't very good for us. Or there's something called inulin, which if you eat more, you'll get like a horrible stomach ache. So how can that actually be changed by actually like nutritious ingredients? Or I learned that potato protein is actually like completely sold out, and the demand for potato protein is incredibly high because it's more natural. So how could you complement potato protein or have a different ingredient that's both grown more sustainably and then way more nutritious for us?
I need to connect you with a radiologist friend of mine who converted me to veganism, and the two of you can nerd out together and perhaps collaborate. I'm very excited to do
this. Yes. Yes. And if we think too, like in our supply chains, there's also things like aquafeed, right? If you look into what's in aquafeed, that's pretty awful. So instead of like feeding fish basically other tiny fish, that's super unsustainable, and the nutrients, like the amount of omega-3s is going down, and the number of things, how can we actually more sustainably look at our supply chains and do things in a much cleaner and more eco-friendly way too?
Such an exciting field. Thank you. I think we have a few more questions, and these are for all of you. So feel free to attack them at your own pace. But you know, how have your roles in your art organizations evolved, and how do you predict they'll evolve beyond 2021? And then, as I mentioned, we do have quite a few college students in this audience here and young professionals. So we'd love to know a bit more how we can support your missions and get involved.
Well, I can jump in on the college students, because that's a real passion of mine. I do a lot of presentations at universities, particularly to engineering classes for obvious reasons. And I think it's so important. Unfortunately, our university institutions are not keeping up with the environmental agenda, to be honest. So for example, engineering is probably the best example. Engineers don't really learn any environmental, they don't have environmental courses as their core coursework, which is so wrong for the group of people who are responsible for designing the majority of things in our world. The fact that they are not actually exposed to environmental implications and the need to have environmental design is actually, I think, very unfortunate, but it's just the reality of our educational institutions. And so I think students, it's just so important that students keep an open mind and continue to try to drive the education that they experience to make sure that they incorporate those very important holistic things that are not necessarily part of the core educational courses. And so I find working with students so inspiring, because they ask the best questions, usually the hardest questions, and they are the most inspiring. And so I think students also inspire those of us who have been, or getting a little long in the tooth and have been around for a long time, that we need that inspiration too. So I think there's a real role for students.
And why do you think that is, that there isn't a deep connection between the environmental sciences and engineering? Is it just traditional curriculum, or?
Yep. Yeah, it truly is. It truly is. It just does not keep up. It's the same thing as if it doesn't even, it's not just engineering, but any faculty. If you actually go even at the graduate level to try to find professors who are coherent in the subjects that you want to focus on can be very difficult, because it takes time. It takes years and years for those institutions to catch up. They just can't seem to keep up with the current realities, and that's unfortunate.
That makes sense.
I'm sure Elizabeth has probably experienced that as well as Niha, that you've both seen that from your end as well, that it's almost like you almost have to be a bit of a renegade to be able to study the things you want to study, because it's not just inherently in the curriculum.
Yes. I remember an ecology class that I took as an undergrad, and it was seen sort of as this fringe exploration, right? But I loved it. And I think really just based on my family, I grew up understanding like supply chains, and I thought it was so interesting, and the animals, and that was so new to so many people. But now actually my work is so much around understanding the food chain and supply chains, but it seems so unusual that I have this, that this is not my first dose of that. So I highly encourage, if you're interested, branch out, kind of sniff into what are you passionate about? What are you excited about? And kind of devour that knowledge. I'm also totally biased. I don't know if Heather said this, but I'm a residential scholar at MIT, so I still live on campus. I love being a part of the community and ecosystem, but really, I think take this unique time when you're in college to explore what are you really interested in, and be fearless as far as getting into it. And I would say that too, that I guess a piece of career advice, if you're up for one, is really turn what you love into your job. It will creatively fuel you.
Yeah, we had a webinar last week for our campus club members on exploring your passions and interests. And there was a significant fear around turning your passions and hobbies into work. But there was also a lot of hunger for being able to explore things that weren't readily available and really making them your discipline. So there really is this push and pull, and it's all about balance, I think. But Elizabeth, since we have you talking, and then we'll go to Niha, the evolution within, and I know you're sort of new to your role in your organization, but what do you predict for 2021 and beyond?
For ZX, tell me more.
And ABI.
Oh, I mean, I think the dedication to sustainability is real. I think this can be measured, I guess you could say, with talent and with dollars. And I've been very impressed, like specifically the talent that is with the people that are responsible for trying to make a difference in this space, and then the attention for where those dollars are, and the spending and the real effort and time. I also feel like, and I'm curious what everyone else feels about this too, but if you look at the companies that have said they will be net zero by 2030 or 2040, I feel like there really has been a change, maybe in the past 18 months or the past year. I don't feel like this is a trend. I feel like this is more of a reality now.
Yeah, I encourage either Niha or Christina to expand on that. It is less of my wheelhouse.
Yeah, I guess in terms of answering the questions that you have, and even what Elizabeth said, I have seen a significant change over the last year, with more brands, listening, some brands even holding themselves accountable, or any companies. But I guess what I would like to see more of, and what I'm hoping to see more of, is brands and tech companies embracing the idea of degrowth. And degrowth basically meaning it's just a reimagining of the common values that you have, towards care, solidarity, autonomy, and really transforming societies into or societies to value economic growth based on how well your people are thriving, how well society is thriving, and how well the environment is thriving, and not just base growth based on monetary gain, as well as just producing as much as people are consuming, instead of falling into this cycle of overproduction and excess consumption. It really is on the companies, because consumers can only do so much. They're just doing what the companies are telling them to do at the end of the day. So I am hoping that companies do embrace that a lot more, as well as seeing a lot more BIPOC leaders in this space. And by BIPOC, I mean like Black, Indigenous, and people of color leaders, mainly because they have been living sustainably for millennia, and they have immense knowledge on the ways we can move forward that people might not even know or not even have explored yet. There's an insane wealth of knowledge in other cultures that I would just love for these people and cultures to be centered more. And as well as when it comes to how can college students and young professionals support these missions and get involved, I think in general in the sustainability space, a lot of the narrative has been surrounded around consumerism, like how to be a conscious consumer, or how can I buy myself into sustainability. And we really need more of the narrative to be on how can I be engaged in this movement and truly help out. And I think a lot of the ways that college students and young professionals can do that is through supporting different bills and policies that are being passed. So for one example, the SB3 garment worker bill in Los Angeles, California is being passed. And that's basically to ensure minimum wage for garment workers in that area, because right now they're being paid by the piece rate. And so, supporting grassroots efforts and mutual aid is definitely what I would love to see more of, instead of focusing on, how can we just reduce everything? Because yes, that's important, but I think collective action is what's going to help a lot, as well as not just focus things on consumer-based actions.
Yeah, Heather, if I just want to jump in and build on what Elizabeth was talking about, because I think we're at a very unique stage right now where we truly are, there is a different paradigm emerging. Traditionally, the way that we made environmental progress was governments would come up with policy that were built on basically public interest, and then they would drag the private sector to the table to actually fulfill the policy. We're in a stage now where the governments can't even keep up with a policy because the private sector is so far out ahead. I mean, you talk about things like some of the targets you're talking about, Elizabeth, absolutely true. I mean, we have statements now where, large automotive companies are saying they are not going to make anything with an internal combustion engine after 2040. That did not come from government policy. And certainly in my area of waste, that the leadership is all coming from the private sector. Honestly, it is. It's gone from back, in my early days in this industry, it was a case of basically the corporations would, they might give some lip service to some of these things, but now it's like they are so far out ahead that we are having a hard time keeping up with policy for the things that they are actually not just enacting themselves, but encouraging us to do as a country or as a jurisdiction. And I mean, that is a huge change. And I think that allows us to have the level of innovation that we arguably need to make a real difference. That governments are just not nimble enough to do these things, but the private sector is. So I don't know, Elizabeth and Niha, if you're seeing this, but in our area of waste, we are really seeing this movement.
I find it like incredibly optimistic. And I was very skeptical, I don't want to say recently, but 18 months ago, very skeptical of feeling like we had a big problem and not a lot of movement for it. And I'm pretty delighted at what I'm seeing. I mean, we have a lot of work still to do, but I think that exactly, Christina, as you were talking about, that the paradigm has shifted. There's real dollars being put to this. I also feel sometimes like money really is energy, and that it can do incredibly good things too. But I'm pretty optimistic and excited about that.
Thank you both. I'm so glad you did take the time to circle back on that. I'm going to leave some time for questions here. We had a few people submit questions prior to the session. So Amy, I will let you take it away.
Of course. Okay. Let's see. Someone would like to know, this one actually came in during the session, Heather, if that's okay. People were really excited to see that you guys had pivoted fields, and most of you came in with the more traditional background rather than studying environmental sustainability in college. People were curious as to, like, at what point did you realize you wanted to make the transition, and do you have any notable, I guess, stories or advice is how they phrased it going through that? Was there a mentor that particularly helped you? How was that transition for you guys?
Yeah, I guess I can start. So for me, I transitioned into sustainability when I realized that, my passion just wasn't there in the degree that I got. And I sort of fell into it just by seeing a lot of different advocates and activists just on social media. I wasn't, a specific mentor or anything. I just saw the incredible things people were doing, and I wanted to get involved in any way that I could. And so, I feel like there's this idea that you need a formal education to do anything that you're doing, especially when you are in a high school or in college. This is sort of the narrative that's fed to you. But I mean, you can very much learn a skill set outside of just your formal degree and make that, your career. I very much think it's doable. It's sort of what I've done. And when it comes to, oh, sorry, what was the second half of the question?
Yeah, how was the pivot or the transition for you? Any
Yeah.
like process itself after you've decided?
Yeah. Initially it was a lot of learning, but I think when it is something, if you are trying to pivot to something that you're passionate about, you kind of end up falling into it and going really deep without realizing. And that's what happened to me. It's almost exciting and thrilling as you are going through the whole process. So that's how I personally felt. And when it does come to some starting points, if you are wanting to go into sustainability specifically, I think some incredible resources are Intersectional Environmentalist. They have a bunch of amazing starting points to start learning more about the different intersections, whether it be, energy, fashion. They have so many different resources on that. And Slow Factory Education is another incredible open source semester-based education where it's just a lecture a week and it's free for everyone. And you're learning so much about sustainability in ways that you probably never thought of before. It's truly an eye-opening way to learn about sustainability from different intersections. So, just finding things online, because I don't think sustainability should be gate kept by just, academic institutions and getting a degree. It's genuinely something for everyone, as well as any profession. And you can always, jump into it at any point in life. So many people have pivoted even without degrees. So it's very much something that's doable for a lot of students and young professionals.
And I think as much as anything, we need to be open to pivoting too. It's interesting listening to Niha. It's like, again, back when I did my pivot, there was no internet. There certainly was no social media as a result. So it was through more traditional sources of information like books, magazines. Believe it or not, that was really what made me change. And so it's so much easier now. You have so much more information. So we need to be open to some of these other ideas and realizing where we really need to land.
Great. We might have time for one more question and then we'll do a quick close.
Sure. This one was sent in beforehand. It's a little more towards GrasshoppHer's mission, which is connecting female and non-binary mentors and mentees, as you all know. This is asking specifically about what qualities you look for in a mentor, or how you try to mentor other women or other individuals in your field.
I could start. I think in a very practical way, my suggestion for finding a mentor is find someone that you really trust and that you feel like there is a natural relationship and kind of a pull, because that will be so important to naturally grow it. And then I think too, for mentoring is I feel like I get so much back by mentoring that there's so much, I don't want to say unexpected depth, because that's somewhat pessimistic, but the amount that you both learn about yourself and then really helping the other person is incredible to give back and to be a part of the ecosystem. And I think too, as far as how can we nurture each other too, some of these relationships that you'll have will transform, and you might end up working with the person, or they could refer you for a job, but to be really open how the relationship can grow. And in 5 years or 10 years, you both might be in a really interesting spot.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Just in the interest of time, and I want to be respectful to you all, we'll close, but thank you to Christina, Niha, Elizabeth, and Amy for this amazing session. You've been so educational, and each of you are role models in your own fields, and from the Grasshopper community, we really thank you for that. Just a quick couple of announcements on our side. Grasshopper has launched 2 initiatives. One's our Grassambassador initiative for ambassadors on campus. You can check out more about these leadership roles on our website. And the second is our Grasshopper Campus Clubs. It's a 9-month initiative to help future grads learn about and obtain leadership skills for job hunting and job obtaining during the pandemic. So all of this is online, and we're always excited to hear from you. We launched a Slack community. We have our app that allows you access to mentors and mentees. So please visit us online and on our social to get involved. And that is it in terms of our announcements. We'll see you on the next webinar. And thank you again to all of our wonderful panelists for joining us tonight. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Heather.